Hi, I'm Charlotte Embry, and my research is on the colony collapse of the bees. I found this very interesting because I love nature and I love flowers, and I've been hearing about this for a long time. So, a little food for thought is one in every bite of food eaten worldwide depends on pollinators, and there's more pollinators than honeybees, but especially the bees to make this a really successful harvest. And even though there has been a great loss in bees, no staple foods have really been jeopardized. Another interesting fact is that pollinators contribute $24 billion to the U.S. economy. And out of that, with that, 15 billion of that comes from honeybees alone. So, with that being said, I want to talk about CCD, which is the colony collapse of bees. And it is a phenomenon that occurs when the majority of the worker bees in the colony disappear and leave behind the queen bee with plenty of food, a few nurse bees to care for the remaining immature baby bees, and to care for the queen. And the bees don't die in the hive. They fall off somewhere and they die alone by themselves. And researchers have said this makes it very difficult to find what they call carcass bee bodies to research to figure out exactly what's going on. So, the next thing I want to talk to you about is exactly what this is. Um, The bees leave their hives. It's spontaneous without any warning, and but outside of the beehive, they cannot live very long at all. Um, it the disorder kills worker bees that have left the hive, and of course to search for food, and they just simply don't come back. And it's been reported that between 1947 and 2005, that the number of bees in the United States have declined over 40%, from 5.9 million up into date. 204 million bees is into account. A third of the bees died during the winter months, and this phenomenon that has happened is doubled the typical rate of between 15 and 20% of healthy bees. Causes of the bee colony collapse. Um, Scientists thought back in 2006 that it was viruses, pesticides, fungicides that made the bees vulnerable to these mites that they can get allergic to. And in January 2013, the European Food Safety Authority reported that there was at least three known neonicotinoid class insecticides that weakens the bees' immune system. And the bees pick up these pesticides through dust and residue on the nectar. And not only does it affect them, but then when they bring it back to the beehive, therefore it affects the other bees. And here's a picture of some affected bees. And you can tell they're not even, they're just really, they're like almost mummified. They're just, calcified kind of. So then researchers say no one is suggesting that these pesticides alone cause the declining of the bees. Some possible causes are, of course, pesticides, mites, fungi, even how the beekeepers keep if they don't properly keep the hives the way that they should, malnutrition, even poor quality of a queen bee, starvation, and like I said, there's just the climate change, a harsh winter. There's really no one thing that has caused this, the decline of this. It's a combination of things that they have. And as I said before, the bees pick up these pesticides and poisons through dust and residue, and not only does it affect them, but they bring it back to the hive, and it weakens the immune system, and as a result, it makes them more susceptible to different parasites, and that causes them to die out. Researchers also have said that one theory is that a chemical damages the bees' ability to find their way back home, and they get lost and they simply die because they can't they run out of energy because they've had nothing to eat to get back home to the beehive. Another thing that they talked about was because of the frequent vanish, beekeepers will open their hives and only find just a small brood of bees developing, maybe the queen, a few worker bees, the drones, but most of the worker bees have just completely disappeared. And they have died like this on the slide here. And some of them wouldn't actually be all of them in the hive, but even found outside of the hive. There's a thing that they call the spooky zombies, and it's actually a parasite that lays an egg. It's called a zombie fly, and it will attack the bee and it'll lay the egg in its abdomen. And when the larva hatches, it'll start eating on the bee's brain and wings. And of course, this can affect the other bees and get into them and cause them to leave. From 2016, when this was really starting to be a problem, up into 2013, it's been reported that more than 10 million beehives have been lost to CCD, and that's nearly twice the normal rate of loss. Some of the research that has been done, at least 9 states, Kentucky being one, urges the state university to research the decline of course, the honeybee population, to work with farmers to manage crops, and then habitat protection. Also in Kentucky, the state agencies to develop a plan to encourage co-licensing to locate and protect pollinator habitation. Federal action, the EPA also helps pollinator health in a variety of ways, updating pesticide labels. But one of the problems they found that a lot of these companies that are making the labels, they're afraid that they are saying whatever they want to say and maybe not putting everything on the label that should be on there. Here is a picture